Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Performance Assurance Dashboards pre-release webinar for service providers. My name is Amy and I work on the communications team for the Retcode Manager, and I will be facilitating today's session. I have joining me today colleagues from across the Retcode Manager team. So before we begin, just a couple of bits of housekeeping. This session is being recorded and the recording and slides for this event will be made available on the Rec portal next week. If everybody could please keep their microphones and cameras off unless speaking, it would be greatly appreciated. So to take your questions today, we will be using Slido, and you can access this via the QR code that's currently on the screen. If you have a smartphone, you can scan the QR code with your camera app, or alternatively, you can type the number that's on screen into Slido on your web browser. If you're using the desktop app for Teams, you will also notice that there is an S icon at the top of the screen, and you can click this to access Slido that way as well. We will have a designated Q&A section at the end of the session, but please feel free to raise any questions that you may have as they come to you throughout the session. So I will now pass over to my colleague Andrew to take us through the agenda for today.
Thanks, Amy. I shall come back on camera. So hi everybody, welcome to the session this afternoon. So the purpose of this session is just to take you through, obviously in a test environment and with test data, but the dashboards that will be going live, we're expecting to go live next week, exact timings and dates to be confirmed, and there is a small chance that SLAs will go live slightly later than others. But we'll obviously keep everybody informed on that. So the purpose of this is really just to take you through what's going to be available to you in the portal as a service provider, and service provider slash code manager, sort of treating those two as essentially the same for the purposes of this exercise. So we'll talk you just through, what's the content of those dashboards, what's in them, how do you get to them, and we'll just do a quick step through. So we might have lost a line break there, but we'll basically give you a step through of the dashboards in the test environment. There might be the odd person who has been on more than one of these sessions. If you're also a party, for example, this probably is going to be a little bit of a shorter session than those. There's a relatively sort of limited and simple set of data available as a service provider here. So I don't think this will be necessarily too complex for people to sort of go through, and there's not as many different tabs, but we just wanted to make sure everybody had visibility of what is going to be available there. It's also, in fact, actually, if we go on to the next slide, why don't we talk about what's actually in the dashboards? So there are, oh, sorry, was there a question there? Sorry, I thought I heard a voice. No. So there are two tabs, but there are actually three tabs, just to be slightly confusing. So there's a qualitative tab around SLAs, which looks at, as the name would suggest, qualitative SLAs, and then there are two quantitative tabs that's split between the original Rec core services, so the excuse me, the code managers, GDCC, elements of ES, so the original core ES services pre Rec 3.0, and Estes, and then all of the service providers who come on through the CSS process. The quantitative numbers are in the CSS tab. I guess what's probably super important to highlight here is these dashboard tabs are also available to selected users within Reco, and are primarily there to help them review performance and obviously perform their role in terms of monitoring that performance, as well as members within the performance assurance team for the same reason. As a service provider, you will have access to the dashboard showing your data, so whatever particular service and service provider you are. This is data you do provide to us, so we're not telling you new data. This is data you should recognise, hopefully. But the purpose of just surfacing these dashboards to you as service providers, as well as to the Reco and performance assurance users, is we just think it's helpful that, if you like, you see exactly what those doing the performance assurance and wider service monitoring see, and as a result, you're not sort of, if you like, there's a sort of no surprises approach there. And equally, if you see in those dashboards something that you think, oh, that doesn't seem to tally with what I thought we'd reported, you know, that doesn't fit with what I understand our performance to be, then you've got an opportunity to obviously sort of say, oh, hang on a second, I think there's something awry here. You will not see performance of other service providers. The purpose of these dashboards is not to allow you to see how others are performing. That's not the purpose. So it's worth sort of mentioning that. So that's essentially the three tabs we'll take a look at. As I say, it's kind of two tabs, and then you'll be on one or other of the quantitative tabs depending on which service you provide, or in one case both. In terms of actually accessing these, so they will be in the portal, excuse me, once they go live. And if we just go on to the next slide, you won't by default have access to them. You need to be assigned, in this case, the service provider dashboard viewer. So same slides for multiple webinars. So that bottom role there, the service provider dashboard viewer, a user with that role will be able to see your service provider SLA dashboard, and the dashboard you see will be based on obviously which organisation and service provider you're representing. So you know the data within that will obviously be restricted. That can be assigned through where you have a third-party MAU, so where you have a master admin user, somebody who manages the roles of the users in your organisation. The MAU is able to assign it. Otherwise, the portal administration team can do that for you. If you've got any questions on that, easiest way to resolve those is just to go straight to the help desk. They should be able to sort that out for you. Obviously, they will look for confirmation that you should have that access if you're not the designated contract manager for the service provider. So yeah, quite straightforward, but just a step you'll need to take. So if you go in after this next week when they go live and think, oh, that button's not there, make sure you have allocated that role to your respective user, and obviously users in your organisation who you want to have access to this. So if we go on to the next slide, which I think is then basically okay, let's go do a demo. So James is going to be our driver today on the demo. So James, I don't know if you want to take over the screen share there. And what we'll do is we'll just go in and show you the path to get to the dashboards, and then we'll actually just have a quick look through. If there are any questions as we go through, just pop them on Slido, and Amy, I'm sure, will shout. Or if for some reason you can't do that, just pop up the little hand on Teams, and we'll come to you. So as I say, we're on obviously not the live portal here, and the data is dominating what we'll see in a second. But we've logged on. I'm assuming people are familiar with doing that. We then go to party operations. I know technically people aren't parties, but there isn't a service provider operations section, I'm afraid. And you'll see there's an orange tab there that says SLA dashboards. You won't necessarily see all of these rectangles. So for example, you won't see the RPA dashboard because that's for RPA users. The user we're using here has multiple roles, but you will see that SLA dashboard. You just click on that, which hopefully James will now do. And what you'll then get is the dashboard will appear on the screen. For the eagle-eyed amongst you, you'll have noticed the little Power BI icon for a second there. These are Power BI dashboards. So if you're a familiar user with Power BI already from kind of other roles, much of the navigation should be quite straightforward to you. So I'll just walk through a couple of common design elements first, and then we'll just sort of quickly talk through the dashboards and just take you through what's there. As I say, they are quite simple dashboards though, so hopefully you should find them fairly self-explanatory. So in terms of layout, common layout to all of these and other dashboards if you have access to those in other roles. So at the top, we've obviously got a sort of green shaded bar with a title, so just tells us which of the tabs we're in. And then perhaps more importantly, on the right hand side, we've got a date. So that will always be the period of data that you're looking at. So in this case, we're looking at some August 2022 test data. By default, that will always be the latest available data. Excuse me. When you first load in, and we'll talk in a second about how you can sort of go and look at other things. And then on the right hand side, although to be honest, probably not that necessary for these two dashboards, but there's a little eye symbol, and if you put your mouse over it, it just tells you what the dashboard does. It just gives a little description if you can't remember what the purpose of the qualitative dashboard was for, or the quantitative dashboard, or whatever it might be. Below that, we've then got a little filter pane placeholder, so the white bar with the arrow on it. If you click on that, that'll pop out little tray, and you can filter down. So I guess a couple of things to sort of call out really on there. So we can filter by, or sorry, select to a different assurance period. So if you want to go back and have a look at previous set of data that's been loaded. Obviously we've only got some examples so far in the test data set, but simple case of selecting the performance assurance period you're interested in, and that'll obviously then filter the dashboard. So I'll let James show that quickly. And then also the other probably key feature to mention, although probably harder to get lost in this dashboard, but up on the top right of the tray, there's a reset filters button. If you do manage to get yourself, if you like, stuck or lost, so you've kind of filtered yourself down and you seem to have no data left, and you're not sure how to get back out again, if you just pop the filter pane, the filter tray open and hit that reset filter button, that'll just take you back to effectively square one. So it'll take off all of the filters, and it'll put you back to the August in this case, or whatever the latest period is. And then there are some other filters below, so you can filter by service provider, section, and metric description. For almost all, if not all cases, I think service provider will be a fairly redundant filter for yourselves, because you are who you are. But it's obviously more there for Reco and Code Manager users when they're looking across more than one service provider. So we just pop the tray away. So if we then go excuse me, around this one. So this is the qualitative measures. So where you provide reporting on whether the particular measure has met expectation, has got minor improvements required, or we also allow for if a data item is missing, we capture that as a value not provided. So at the moment in the dummy data, everything has met expectations, so we can select all up on the top left in terms of targets, or we can say let's look at everything that meets expectation. Clearly that's the same thing in this case. Had we had others, then we obviously would have had additional squares there to click around. We've then just got some very high level KPIs, so where are the what's the number of items where there are minor improvements required, and what are the number of items where there's just no data been provided. So obviously that's a sort of unmeasurable item. And the little donut gives you a breakdown as well. Not very interesting donut at the moment because it's all green. So we've in that middle section, then we're looking at it by service provider. Now again, because we're looking as though we are a service provider, then we're just seeing a single one, and we are service provider 5 in the test data. We can, if we click on the left hand side there, also look and see, and this is probably more interesting if I'm a service provider, I'm looking at just my performance to see how that looks over time. So if we want to have a click on that, again, we've kept the dummy data quite simple, but we can see over time, okay, we've consistently been meeting expectations. Obviously, if kind of real performance varies from that, you can sort of see, well, how have things been looking. And then, as you'll be aware, many of the service definitions are broken down into sub-service sections. So on the right-hand side, then we've just got a breakdown of that by section. And then in the bottom, we've basically got the detail, including the metric description and the indicator. Obviously, the description there tends to be a bit longer than the dummy text that's available. One other thing I'll just mention quickly, and this works across all of the visuals, is if for some reason you want to, so this table might be an example, you want to look at it a bit bigger, there's a vertical scroll bar here, for example, and you want to just get a sense of the whole thing. There's a little focus mode button on the top right hand corner. When you put your mouse over it, if you just click on that, it'll basically take that to use the full screen. You can have a bit of a better look at that, and then you can go back to the main report in terms of the information there. Final thing probably to say, again, not news to anybody who's familiar with any of the visualization tools that are in common use nowadays, but if you click on items in the report, you will filter other parts of the report. So for example, if on the right hand side so in the middle, James, we filtered by service section, maybe we pick one of those service sections out, then we would see that then filtered elsewhere in the dashboard. So you can click on items there and sort of get to that. So quite straightforward, and as I say, you should recognise your performance because you submitted it. This is really just an opportunity to see how it's been presented to the Code Manager Performance Assurance team and Reco in terms of reviewing that and sort of taking things forward. So it gives you a chance to validate. Obviously, you can use the dashboards in your own internal conversations and things as well if they're helpful. So if we then move across, we'll have a look at the quantitative dashboard. We'll primarily look at, they're very similar, the two. It just sort of splits the services, so we'll sort of walk through one and then just quickly show the other. So similar in many ways, so same structure in terms of title, date, the information thing, the filters pane. We've obviously got some September test data in this one. We typically expect to have things obviously for the same period, although the qualitative is submitted less frequently from memory.
So Andrew, yeah, that is the case. In this case, it's just that's submitted less frequently, which is why you're seeing different periods.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks, James. So again, here we've got some in the top left. We start with how we're doing against the targets. So in this case, test data. So we've got a couple of scenarios now. We've got both target met and target exceeded. So if we just wanted to look at those, say where the target was exceeded, we could click on that box there. Equally, we could have target not met, although we haven't got any of that in this particular test data set. And we've also again got that not provided that we had before. Similarly, we've got those key statistics. So how many have not met target, how many are missing, if any, and then what's the breakdown in the donut chart. Across the middle, similar chart there. How does it break down by service provider, or if you look at it over time, how does that look over time? So obviously here, a slightly more interesting set of test data. We've had sort of things not been provided for a number of months, a couple of targets not met, and then sort of things sort of slowly improving a little bit there. And on the right there, we see, and again, there's a few more sections and obviously a little bit more data, so we can see the breakdown by, where are the sections where things are, in this case, I guess, going particularly well. So sections 4 and 5. And obviously, if you had, target not met, then that would probably, draw the eye quite quickly to that. And then the bottom, we've got a table with all the detail. So, service provider definition area, the metric definition, and then we've got two pairs of columns. Measures are either percentages or values, so we've got sort of two pairs of columns to distinguish there. So if it's a percentage based measure, you'll see the target and then the value reported, and obviously that indicates whether the target's been met, exceeded, or not met. If on the other hand it's a so that's often things like availability, for example, would be a common metric that would apply to. Then we've got ones that are simple measures of numbers of events. So number of times that something wasn't completed by a deadline, for example. If that's set on a simple, the target often flows, no events of that type. There'll be a target, and then obviously the value reported. And again, you can see whether that's been met, exceeded, or not met. And then it just gives you the actual target indication. Final thing to point out is on the top right, you do provide for the service definition a sort of an overall sort of narrative comment on the performance. So this is like an overall summary. Again, if you're familiar with submitting these already, you'll be aware of that, and that just appears there as the comment. That's one where when you are looking across multiple service definitions, often the focus mode is useful. Otherwise, as I say, works very similarly to the other dashboard. So filter pane, very similar, similar filters to be able to do that. And then if we just step across to the CSS variant of that, I guess. So similar structure, in fact, pretty much the same structure. We've obviously got some slightly more interesting test data in this one, so we can see there actually, what happens with things like target not met and data not provided, obviously affecting the KPIs up in the top. Obviously that corresponding donut chart, and then we can obviously see the performance based for that particular service provider. If we have a look at that over time as well, James, just to show that there, although the other one was probably quite indicative, so we can see there. Obviously, with this being a CSS one, we've just done data in from July, and obviously on the right there, that obviously kind of helps you focus in on which of the sections where the sort of biggest gaps are.
We've had a question come in via Slido.
Go for it.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, you do.
Will the data be back populated to when the submissions commenced, so the historical view is accessible when it goes live? Yes,
they will. Yeah. So if you've been submitting for the last 3 months or so, if you're a CSS service provider, that data will be available in there, and that will go obviously against the relevant performance periods, and then obviously things like the time chart will work. If you're a service provider who's been around since the start of REC, then obviously that'll go back a little bit further on the REC core. So we effectively actually have had an internal version of this dashboard running a little longer, so it's the same data set basically behind that, so it just feeds into, we're just now making that available to people through the portal. And I guess probably there's a group of service providers where the data might be being collected and submitted on your behalf, but you then want to go in and see how you're reported here, so that might be a useful use case there. To be honest, that was probably everything I needed to show you. This session, is probably quite generous with its time, given the relative simplicity of these dashboards compared to some of the other party dashboards or the dashboards that PAD members see. So I don't know, Amy, if there's been any other questions on Slido.
Not seen any more come in so far.
Do you want to just leave the page up, James, just because it might just help people if they have got any questions? Sorry. So, well, I guess now's your opportunity, guys. If anybody does have any questions, no question too simple or anything, please ask away. Then put your hand up.
So we've just had another one come in.
Okay.
Will we be sent our login details once it goes live?
So this is just on the REC portal, so they should be your existing REC portal logon details. If you don't have REC portal details, then that can be set up, and we'll perhaps send something around about how to go about doing that sort of after the session, if that's something, if people are sort of going, actually I don't think I've ever logged on to the REC portal, and as service providers there's probably less of a use case for you to have done so than others, then we can get some comms out about getting yourself set up if you're not already.
So Andrew, sorry, it's Elizabeth here, just following up on that. So if someone sets themselves up as a user on the portal and they are a member of that organisation, will you automatically allow them access to these dashboards, or is there a mechanism by which? So let's pick someone at random. I think it's for a few CNC people on the call. Anyone that works at CNC, if they get a login to the portal, does that automatically enable them visibility of the dashboards, or is there a permissions mechanism?
So they need to be given the dashboard viewing role. Which you mentioned earlier on, just because obviously there may be organisations where you don't want everybody in your organisation to have access to this, particularly some of the larger organisations, for example. So that will need to be assigned either by the master admin user, who's the person who's, if you're not familiar with that language, obviously I know you are, Elizabeth, but for the broader benefit, is the nominated individual in your organisation who basically can assign privileges to your users. If you don't have an MAU or you don't know who your MAU is, then if you go to the help desk, they'll be able to just work through that with you. So, but no, we're not giving it by default. We want people to actively choose to make it available, because we recognise there might be cases where you don't want that
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you, Andrew. I was just trying to draw the link between someone's obviously asked, how do I access it? And
Yeah.
the answer was log into the portal, but it might not be quite the case. Okay, so it's the
Absolutely.
service desk that people need to contact.
Yeah. In
That's
terms
your
of user setup, that would be the service desk.
Okay.
But we can obviously send out some guidance in terms of how people can get in contact with that. If you're sort of going, yeah, that's great, how do I get to the service desk? I mean, effectively you can drop a line to the inquiries mailbox, but we'll pop something in an email, because rather than people having to scribble it down as we're going through.
Grand, thank you.
No, thanks, Elizabeth, and thanks for whoever asked the question. I noticed my colleague Anton popped up on screen. I didn't know, Anton, if you wanted to.
I just wanted to draw attention to something. I think you were clear on it, but we've obviously been receiving lots of these submissions each month, and they come on what is a particularly ugly CSV file, and because of that, perhaps people haven't been putting too many comments in. But I think one of the things I would do if I was you first time I saw this, maybe looking at the historic data. So whoever asked that question, it was a good question. Is just have a look at what it looks like and how the commentary comes up. Because it's really natural. Once you see what we see, it's really natural to reflect on how it is and provide commentary that's appropriate. And probably when you've seen these in horrible looking data tables, it wasn't quite as natural to provide the commentary. But when you see it in the flesh, and the most obvious way to do that is look at October or whatever's already in there, and that might slightly change the way people provide commentary. I'm not saying that it needs to change, but once you see what we see, it might be more obvious how to fill in that box. That was it.
Thanks, Anton.
We've had a couple of other questions come in via Slido. So
Okay.
the first one, is the profile set at a specific supplier level, i.e. a domestic supplier would only have the list of submissions they needed to make visible, and a non-domestic theirs, etc.?
I'm not sure I understand that question. The fact somebody's saying supplier makes me wonder. So this is specifically for service providers, not for suppliers. So this is those providing a rec service. So that's and I'll embarrass myself probably by forgetting one or two of them, but obviously we've got the inquiry services, we've got the clearly central switching service, we've got GRDS, CRDS, what else have we got? SDES, GDCC, the code manager functions. I'm sure I've probably missed somebody out there, but off the top of my head. So this is specifically for the reporting around that. If there's somebody who is on this call who is a supplier and therefore a party, there is a separate set of party performance assurance dashboards. There was a session on Tuesday for parties, which was recorded. So if you are a supplier, then you probably needed to be on that session. If I've misunderstood the question, then either throw in a clarification Slido or just pop your hand up and jump on the voice, and we'll see if we can clarify. But then one thing I'll just add to that, but the specific measures that are reported against, obviously there's all generic language in here because we've made test data up, but the specific metrics that are reported on are the particular metrics that apply to your service. So obviously every one of the different services has a different set of SLAs that you report against, and so in real world data that will have that description and those names and those references in there. So I hope that was helpful. If somebody wants to clarify that, please jump in, or if you think you've come to the wrong session, then we can obviously help get you onto the right path. I think I can see actually the questions I've just popped onto Slido. I mean, there's also one around MAU access being automatically assigned.
Yes, yeah, that's correct. We've just got that one.
Yeah, cool. So that's set up when you're set up as an organisation on the portal, and I have to say I'm not super close to exactly the detail of that process, done by other colleagues in the code manager function. But if you've already gone through the process of being set up as an organisation, you will have needed to designate an MAU. So that person will exist. If you're not sure who that person is in your organisation, as I say, probably the quickest thing to do is just drop a quick line to the help desk, and they'd be able to point you in the right direction. They'll have the list of all of those.
Thanks, Andrew. Another one's just come in. When does the data get updated each month?
Yeah, so the data comes in to us from your organisations at the beginning of the month, as some people will be aware, because I'm sure there are some on the call who are involved in providing it to us. That goes into obviously our process to populate dashboards, along with a load of other dashboards that we're not talking about today for parties and things, and that then goes through a review cycle. Where we're just sort of checking through the data, making sure it looks right. To be honest, on SLAs, generally speaking, if it looks wrong, it'll be that there's just a problem with the file submission. It's probably more complicated for some of the other assurance activity that goes on that involves data from a much wider range of sources. But then the intention is that the dashboards will then be, if you like, released into access, not really public access, but effectively user access on the date that we do the pad paper assurance, which is just after the middle of the month. It's tied to the timing of the PABs, which are the last Tuesday of the month. So pad papers is the Tuesday before that. So the last but one Tuesday of the month. Strictly speaking, the SLAs are not as closely tied to that process as some of the other, but obviously we've got a wider data release to do. So to keep things simple, we're just going to go for one release each month.
Thanks, Andrew. We've not had any further questions come in via Slido at the moment. So just a reminder that you can join Slido via the S icon that's at the top of your Teams screen. Or you can go to slido.com and type in the number that's in the meeting chat if you have any questions that you would like to raise.
Thanks, Amy. Just while people perhaps think if there is anything else you'd like to ask, I'll just touch on a couple of other points. So, as I say, we're aiming for dashboards to go live next week. There'll be some comms out once they have gone live, just closing out a couple of final bits and pieces on some of the kind of final test sign-offs and sign-offs on things, and obviously then working through the releases. There will be a user guide that will be on the portal, which effectively does, I guess, a version of this call, i.e. just sort of takes you through the basics of where do I go, what do these various different buttons do, how do I filter things, how do I do all those sorts of things. And we're also going to run another session on Friday next week, which is a sort of initial post go live drop in. So really a chance just to come along and go, I'm stuck, I'm lost, it's not doing what I thought it should do, or whatever it might be. Obviously not one to talk about individual data because it's a sort of open session, but an opportunity to effectively just try and capture any initial questions that people have got about having now actually got the thing in their hands. We will then run additional sessions as and if we need to, but we're going to sort of just slightly play that by ear based on feedback. That might be that another one of these that's a general, okay, how do I use this, is helpful. It may be that individual parties have got very specific questions on data, where a more kind of bilateral type conversation is the most appropriate. So we will run further engagement as we need to, but obviously the nature of that, we just need to see what's the right answer for the need. And also, I probably should have said at the beginning, this is obviously the first release of dashboards, so there's a set of dashboards going out here, and as I mentioned, for some of the use cases, we expect over time that those will kind of evolve and go through further change and improvement. So if you do have any feedback once you start using the dashboards, do please send that in. Easiest way to do that is just to send that into the inquiries mailbox, and that'll get routed to us. We can't obviously promise that we'll make every change that people will ask for. There'll be things that people ask for that contradict with things that other people ask for, and obviously we always need to look at kind of the impact and the cost benefit of those things. But the best way we can kind of understand the different asks that people might have, or the kind of demand for certain things, is obviously if we've got some facts to base that on. So if you do have any feedback or suggestions, then please do send them in, and they'll feed into the backlog process, and add to some things that we've already got on that list.
Thanks, Andrew. We've not had any other questions come in via Slido, so I'm just going to share the slides again. And I think unless anyone else has any further thoughts that they'd like to share, I think we can close the session. Yeah,
I think that's absolutely fine. Obviously, if anybody does have any further questions, please let us know. Yeah, I think probably an hour was a sort of generous allowance of time for this one, so I wasn't sure it was going to take the full hour. So I guess 20 minutes back on a Friday afternoon is probably a good answer for everybody. So one thing I will say is on Slido, or I don't know if you want to cover any of the surveying. Sorry, I'm probably stealing your thunder.
No, it's fine, thank you. So yes, just finally from me, we have set up a survey on Slido today so that you can give us any feedback that you may have on the session. So please feel free to let us know how you thought today's session went. We always find the feedback really useful for future sessions. So yeah, that's it from me, and thank you for joining today.